Good evening, everyone. I am Jamil Magano, a Master of Arts in Public Administration from Romblon campus. So, I will be presenting the different measurements of economic growth. As discussed, economic growth and economic development are not the same thing. Economic development is a normative concept, meaning it is the perception of economic status of what is should be. While the economic growth is objective, meaning is measurable based on its actual value. In this case, economic growth involves formula to measure the values. Let's move on to the main presentation to have a full understanding on quantifying or measurements of economic growth. There are two main measures of economic growth: the gross national product or the GNP and the gross domestic product, the GDP. The gross national product is the measure of the value of all goods and services produced by a country's residents and business regardless of production location, while the gross domestic product is similar to the gross national product, except that it counts all output produced within the borders of a country, including output produced by resident foreigners, but excludes the value of production by citizens living abroad. So now we're going to talk about the distinction between gross national product and the gross domestic product. So the distinction between the gross national product and the gross domestic product can be illustrated using examples from two very different economies such as Angola and Bangladesh. So as we can see, Angola's national income is derived from oil. Multinational companies drill for most of the oil and repatriate their profits. And these profits counts as part of Angola's gross domestic product but not its gross national product. Angola's GDP was 12% higher than its gross national product. By contrast, Bangladesh has few natural resources and little foreign investment. Large number of Bangladeshis work abroad, especially in the Persian Gulf, where men often as construction workers and Bangladeshi women as domestic helpers, just like in the Philippines. So the value of the output produced by these Bangladeshi workers counts as part of Bangladesh gross national product, since these workers are Bangladeshi nationals but not as part of its gross domestic product because the work is performed outside of the country. So Bangladesh's gross national product was 9% higher than its gross domestic product. So this is the official formula for calculating the gross national product. So GNP equals C plus I plus G plus X plus Z, where letter C is the consumption expenditure, I is the investment, G is the government expenditure, X is the net exports, that it is the value of imports minus value of exports, and Z is the net income, that it is the net income inflow from abroad minus net income outflow to foreign countries. So the GNP rather takes into account the manufacturing of tangible goods such as vehicles, agricultural products, machinery, and others, as well as the provisions of services like the healthcare and education. So, gross national product also includes taxes and depreciation. The cost of services used in producing goods is not computed independently since it is included in the cost of finished products. So now, let's talk about the importance of gross national product. Policymakers rely on gross national product as one of the important economic indicators. The gross national product produces crucial information on manufacturing, savings, investments, employment, production outputs of major companies, and other economic variables. Policymakers use this information in preparing policy papers that legislators use to make laws. Economists rely on the GNP data to solve national problems such as inflation and poverty. So, when calculating the amount of income earned by a country's residents, regardless of their location, the gross national product becomes a more reliable indicator than the gross domestic product. Previously, we discussed about how are we going to calculate the gross national product. So, in this slide, we are going to talk about how to calculate the gross domestic product. So, the official formula to calculate the GDP is the total of consumer spending, that is the consumption, plus business investment, the investment in the formula, and the government spending, the government expenditure, plus the total exports minus the total imports. So there are four types of GDP that will be presented in the next slide. There are four types of gross domestic product. First is the nominal gross domestic product. Second, the real gross domestic product. Third, the actual gross domestic product. And last is the potential gross domestic product. So, the gross domestic product can be measured in several different ways. The most common methods are the following. First is the nominal gross domestic product is the total value of all goods and services produced at current market prices. So this includes all the changes in the market pricing during the current year due to inflation or deflation. The real gross domestic product is the sum of all goods and services produced at constant prices. So the prices used in determining the GDP are based on certain base year or the previous years. This provides a more accurate count of economic growth as it is already an inflation-adjusted measurement, meaning the effects of inflations are taken out. The actual gross domestic product is the real-time measurement of all outputs at any interval or any given time. So it demonstrates the existing state of business of the economy. And lastly is the potential gross domestic product, where it is the ideal economic condition with 100% employment across all sectors, steady currency, and stable product prices. Let us now discuss the importance of the gross domestic product. The gross domestic product represents the economic production and growth of a nation and is one of the primary measures used to determine the overall well-being of a country's economy. One way to determine how well a country's economy is by flourishing by its gross domestic product growth rate. So this rates reflects the increase or the decrease in the percentage of economic output in monthly, quarterly, yearly periods. So the gross domestic product enables economic policymakers to assess whether the economy is weakening or progressing, if it needs improvements or restrictions, and if threats of recessions or inflations are imminent. So from these assessments, the government agencies can determine if expansionary monetary policies are needed to address the economic issues. And here are my references for this topic. And this ends my presentation about the measurement of economic growth. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Good evening, everyone.